A billionaire CEO took his girlfriend out for dinner. But when he saw his ex-wife with child, Ryan Carter stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, gazing down at the glittering skyline. The lights of the city seemed to pulse with a rhythm that mirrored his own, steady, controlled, and unyielding. As the CEO of one of the most successful tech companies in the world, Ryan had built his empire from the ground up. His life was a meticulous blend of luxury and precision, a constant ballet of meetings, strategy sessions, and international deals. He was accustomed to being the one in control, whether in the boardroom or his personal life. The sharp click of his leather shoes echoed through the vast space as he walked to his desk. A sleek, modern setup, it was adorned only with the essentials: a crystal decanter filled with aged whiskey, a few legal papers stacked in perfect order, and a solitary photograph of him and Emily, his ex-wife, smiling under the warm glow of their wedding day. The photo was tucked in the corner of the desk, almost as if he didn't want to acknowledge it, but it was always there, silently reminding him of what he had lost. He sighed, momentarily lost in thought, but the soft ping of his phone broke the silence. It was a text from Amanda, his girlfriend. "Are we still on for tonight?" He smirked, his thumb hovering over the screen as he replied, "Of course. I'll pick you up at 8. Amanda was beautiful, ambitious, and young, everything that Ryan thought he needed right now. The truth, though, was that their relationship had never been more than a convenience. She craved the high life, and he craved the company of someone who admired his success. It was an arrangement that worked for them both. But Ryan knew deep down that something was missing. There was a hollowness he couldn't shake, a loneliness that crept in at night when the deals were done, and the city fell quiet. As the evening unfolded, Ryan found himself slipping into the routine of being with Amanda. They met at a trendy rooftop restaurant, the kind where the rich and powerful gathered to showcase their wealth and influence. Amanda, dressed in a tight-fitting dress that gleamed under the dim lights, looked every bit the part of the perfect arm candy. She was the epitome of sophistication, but Ryan knew that beneath her polished exterior lay a woman who valued status more than anything else. Amanda was in her late 20s, a striking brunette with eyes that seemed to size up everything around her, especially Ryan. She never missed an opportunity to flaunt the fact that she was dating a billionaire, often mentioning how she loved the finer things in life, whether it was the finest wine, the latest designer, clothes, or the high-end vacations they took. She always smiled with just the right amount of charm, as if the world owed her something, and Ryan had long since stopped questioning her motives. Their conversations flowed easily, but it was always about surface-level things. How was the stock market today? Did Ryan see the new luxury car model? How would they celebrate the closing of a new deal? Amanda was always talking about the next big thing, but Ryan couldn't remember the last time they had a deep conversation. It was as though their entire relationship was a carefully curated performance, designed to impress rather than connect. She was perfect for the role of the girlfriend, and Ryan played the part of the doting boyfriend, at least in public. As they sipped wine and discussed a recent business venture, Amanda placed her hand on his, a practiced gesture of affection. Ryan noticed the faintest hint of impatience in her eyes. She was looking for more than just the occasional dinner date and casual companionship. But Ryan was too distracted to fully engage, his mind wandering back to a time when things felt different. A soft buzz in his ear, his phone, again, another message from his assistant. But this time, Ryan felt the familiar weight of something deeper pressing on his mind. It was the photograph on his desk that did it, the one from his wedding day to Emily. He could almost feel the warmth of that day again, the joy in her eyes as they stood at the altar. Emily had been everything to him once, smart, compassionate, and undeniably beautiful. They had been a perfect match in every way, or so he had thought. Ryan had never been the type to let his emotions dictate his decisions. He had always been driven, focused on building his empire, and that ambition came with a cost. When he and Emily first married, everything seemed possible. They were young, in love, and filled with dreams of a future together. But as the years passed, something changed. Ryan's obsession with work took over, and Emily began to feel neglected. He couldn't recall the exact moment things had started to shift. It had been gradual, like the slow erosion of something once strong. She had asked him to slow down, to spend more time with her, but the board meetings and deals were always more pressing. The night they decided to separate was a quiet one. Emily had stood in front of him, eyes filled with sadness, and told him she couldn't continue living in the shadow of his ambition. She needed more than what he could offer, and though Ryan fought to keep her, he knew deep down that he had failed her. They had agreed to an amicable divorce, no lawyers, no mess. But the emptiness lingered. She had moved on, and he had focused more on work, but the scar of losing her never quite healed. There were days when he would find himself thinking of what might have been, but he buried those thoughts deep, not wanting to show vulnerability. As he sat across from Amanda, Ryan found himself drifting into a haze of thoughts. The restaurant's soft music played in the background, the clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation. Everything felt distant. Amanda was laughing at something he had said, but Ryan wasn't really listening. His mind wandered back to Emily, as it so often did. There was no denying the fact that he had lost something precious, something irreplaceable. He had spent so many years focused on his rise to the top, but now all he felt was the weight of his success pressing down on him. What had it all been for if he couldn't have the one thing that mattered? Success had brought him fame, wealth, and power, but at a cost. He had built an empire, but his personal life had crumbled. He had sacrificed love, companionship, and emotional connection in exchange for business victories. And now he was left wondering if it was all worth it. Amanda was beautiful, sure, but there was a coldness to their relationship that Ryan couldn't shake. He wondered if she cared about him, or just the life he could give her. It made him feel restless, as though something fundamental was missing. As Amanda chatted on about her latest fashion purchases, Ryan caught himself zoning out again. His thoughts drifted back to Emily, and the regret that gnawed at him. The sharp ache in his chest was a reminder of what could have been. Yet, as much as he wanted to call Emily, as much as he wanted to apologize, he knew that the past couldn't be undone. There was no going back. But tonight, something felt different. Ryan had arranged everything meticulously, as he always did. The dinner was meant to be a celebration, a gesture of success for closing a high-profile deal that would further solidify his position in the business world. Amanda had been eager to accompany him, knowing how these occasions reflected her own image of luxury and power. But as Ryan went over the details for the evening in his mind, something felt off. He had always prided himself on his ability to plan, to ensure that every moment was perfectly executed, but tonight there was an unease gnawing at him. The anticipation of the evening felt hollow. Amanda had eagerly agreed to the dinner, but her excitement seemed centered around the spectacle of it all, more about being seen than celebrating an achievement. He had planned this night with the hope that it would bring some kind of emotional connection, but deep down, He wasn't sure he would find it. His thoughts flitted to Emily, as they often did, but he pushed them away. Tonight wasn't about the past. Tonight was about moving forward, or so he told himself. When Amanda arrived at his penthouse, she looked stunning, her outfit meticulously chosen to make an impression. She was glowing, but her glow was one of calculated beauty, not warmth. Ryan kissed her cheek as she entered, and they exchanged pleasantries. But he couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship, like so many of his business ventures, was simply transactional. There was an undeniable distance between them, one that he couldn't seem to bridge, no matter how many lavish dinners or vacations he provided. The restaurant was a jewel among the elite dining spots in the city, a modern, upscale venue perched on the edge of the city's skyline, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a sweeping view of the twinkling lights below. Every detail of the place exuded wealth: the dark mahogany floors, the soft, ambient lighting that bathed the room in a warm glow, the plush velvet chairs that seemed to whisper of exclusivity. It wasn't just a place to eat. It was a place to be seen, a gathering spot for the city's most influential people. Celebrity faces could be spotted at almost every table, their conversations veiled behind an air of discreet opulence. As Ryan and Amanda were led to their table, heads turned. People recognized him instantly, as they always did, and some exchanged polite nods. He didn't acknowledge them, not out of arrogance, but because he had learned long ago that acknowledging every greeting would be impossible. In this world, appearances were everything, and Ryan had become a master of controlling them. He ordered their drinks, making sure everything was set in motion just the way it was supposed to be. Amanda, on the other hand, was already scanning the room, her eyes gleaming with interest as she recognized a few familiar faces from the high society circles they both moved in. Ryan sat back, watching Amanda as she smiled and waved at a few people, her charm on full display. She revelled in the attention, enjoying the subtle compliments about her appearance, the admiration of the people around her. There was something about her that fascinated Ryan, but not in the way one would expect. She didn't seem interested in the deep things. Her focus was on how others perceived them, how this dinner would reflect on her. As the meal progressed, Amanda was the perfect picture of grace and beauty. Her laughter was light and infectious, her words always calculated to keep the conversation flowing, but there was an emptiness beneath the surface. She constantly checked her phone, not in a frantic way, but as if she was waiting for some kind of confirmation from the world that she mattered. Ryan noticed the way she positioned herself, ensuring that the photographers in the restaurant would catch her best angles, even when she was simply taking a sip of wine. She asked Ryan about his next business venture, but there was no real curiosity in her tone, only a polished desire to stay in the conversation, to keep up the appearance of being deeply involved in his world. She didn't ask him about his thoughts or feelings. There were no questions that probed deeper, no genuine interest in his life outside of the business world. She was a woman who thrived on the exterior, the clothes, the luxury, the praise, and that suited Ryan for now. In her, he found no pressure to confront the void he often felt. Ryan was too distracted by his thoughts to engage as fully as Amanda would have liked, but she didn't seem to mind. She continued talking about her latest shopping spree, a new luxury car she was considering, and how they could celebrate their successes. She didn't notice the way Ryan's attention wandered, how his eyes drifted across the room, always half absent. Ryan wasn't really hearing Amanda anymore. His mind was elsewhere, somewhere far from the glossy world of high-end dinners and sparkling conversation. His thoughts kept circling back to Emily, as they often did when he least expected them. Tonight, though, there was something different, something in the air, a feeling that unsettled him even more than usual. It was like a shift, an invisible tug pulling him towards something he couldn't quite understand. His eyes scanned the room, moving from table to table, trying to shake off the feeling of being out of place in his own life. For a brief moment, he thought he saw a familiar face, but it was gone before he could be sure. He blinked, trying to clear his mind, but the sense of unease lingered. Amanda was chatting away, oblivious to his distraction, her voice rising and falling as she narrated yet another story of her social calendar. But Ryan's mind was elsewhere. It was as if the room had grown smaller, the faces blurring into the background as his thoughts raced. Amanda caught his gaze and smiled, thinking it was just business stress getting the better of him. "You're always working, Ryan. You need to relax and enjoy the moment," she said, her tone light and carefree. Ryan forced a smile. "I'll be fine. Just a little tired." But deep down, he knew it wasn't just work that was weighing on him. There was something more, something from the past that kept pulling him under, and no amount of luxury or status could drown it out. As the night wore on, he found himself glancing back toward the entrance, feeling the tug of something he couldn't quite name. Ryan's eyes were half focused on Amanda, who was enthusiastically discussing the latest fashion trends, when suddenly the doors to the restaurant swung open. A burst of laughter followed, light and familiar. It was Emily's laugh, the one he hadn't heard in years. His heart skipped a beat, and before he could even process the sound, he saw her, standing in the doorway. She was glowing, her presence undeniable. She moved with a kind of grace that still had the power to captivate him. But what truly stopped him in his tracks was the man beside her. A young man, likely in his early 30s, held her hand with a possessiveness that made Ryan's stomach twist. He wasn't sure why, but seeing Emily with someone else in such an intimate way hit him like a punch to the gut. He froze, unable to look away. Then, his eyes caught something else, something that made the air feel thick and heavy. Emily was pregnant. The soft curve of her belly was unmistakable. The realization struck him like a wave, and for a moment the noise of the restaurant seemed to fade. He couldn't breathe. Ryan had never imagined this. Seeing Emily, the woman he had once loved, about to embark on a new chapter of her life without him. His mind raced through a blur of emotions, shock, disbelief, and a deep, aching regret. The room felt suddenly too loud, too bright. His gaze stayed fixed on Emily, even as she smiled and greeted the staff, completely unaware of the whirlwind inside him. Memories of their life together crashed into him. Soft moments they had shared, the times they had laughed together, and the quiet nights when everything had felt right. He remembered how he had promised her a life of happiness, but somewhere along the way, he'd lost sight of what truly mattered. As Emily and her companion were shown to their table, Ryan struggled to stay composed. His grip on his wine glass tightened as he tried to steady his breathing. How had this happened? Why hadn't he known? He had moved on, or so he thought. But seeing her like this, so effortlessly happy, shattered that illusion in an instant. Then, a light-hearted burst of laughter from Emily cut through his thoughts, a sound that felt like a sharp reminder of all that he had let slip away. It was so easy for her, so natural. She had clearly moved on, embraced a new life with someone else. But Ryan couldn't shake the image of her pregnant, her future unfolding before him while his was rooted in the cold, sterile success he had spent his life building. Amanda, who had been chatting animatedly about her upcoming plans, noticed that Ryan had gone unusually quiet. She followed his gaze, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of Emily and the man at her side. There was something in the way Ryan was staring at them. Something that didn't sit right with her. "Ryan?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "Is everything okay?" Ryan snapped back to the present, forcing a tight smile onto his face as he met her eyes. "Yeah, just surprised," he said, his voice strained. He quickly took a sip of his drink, trying to shake off the discomfort that had settled into his chest. Amanda raised an eyebrow, not fully convinced by his quick deflection. "Surprised by what?" she pressed, her curiosity piqued. But Ryan didn't want to talk about it. He couldn't. The thought of explaining, of revealing the raw emotions swirling within him, felt impossible. He tried to regain control, to bury the tidal wave of feelings before it could fully overwhelm him. But his mind kept drifting back to Emily and the realization of how far apart their lives had grown. Amanda leaned back in her chair, her eyes still studying him with a mix of concern and confusion. She wasn't used to seeing Ryan rattled like this. Usually he was the picture of control, calm, and composure. But tonight, something had broken through that veneer. And it wasn't just the business deal or the stress of work. It was something deeper, something that had nothing to do with her. As Ryan tried to mask the unease, Amanda couldn't help but wonder what had caused this sudden shift. She had always thought of their relationship as a well-oiled machine, each part serving its purpose. At least that's how it had seemed to her. But now, seeing him this way, it felt like a crack had appeared in the facade of their perfect life. What was going on in his head? And more importantly, who was the woman who had just walked into the restaurant and shaken him so deeply? As Ryan stared at Emily, everything around him faded into the background. The luxurious restaurant, the laughter, even Amanda's voice seemed distant. His mind had taken him back in time, back to when life had felt simpler, yet infinitely more complicated. The memories rushed at him in vivid snapshots, moments from their marriage that were once filled with warmth and love. He saw Emily smiling at him across the dinner table, her eyes sparkling with the kind of hope only a new couple can have. He remembered their weekend getaways, the quiet nights spent watching movies, and the way she would rest her head on his shoulder as they shared the same space without needing to speak. Back then, everything felt right. They were a team, united in their goals and dreams. But with the passing years, something had shifted. Ryan had been so consumed by his rise in the corporate world, his relentless pursuit of success, that he failed to see the growing distance between them. What had once been a partnership based on mutual understanding slowly turned into a series of missed opportunities, moments when he could have been there for her. But instead, he chose to work late into the night, chasing deals and climbing higher. The memories began to blur as Ryan's mind drifted deeper into the past, searching for the precise moment when everything changed. Emily had always been supportive, never demanding more than what she felt was fair. She had understood the sacrifices that came with his career, at least she tried to. But over time, the loneliness had become unbearable. She had hoped he would find a balance, that he would realize that love couldn't survive on its own if it was left to wither in the shadow of his ambitions. Ryan recalled the conversations they had late at night, when the silence between them was thick with unsaid words. Emily had asked him gently at first to spend more time with her, to give their marriage the attention it needed. But he had always brushed it off, reassuring her that once the next big project was complete, everything would settle down. The reality, of course, was that the work never stopped. He kept making promises, but his actions showed otherwise. He had always chosen his career, his empire, over the woman he had once sworn to love forever. Emily's quiet resentment had begun to grow. Ryan had seen the signs, but failed to address them, too caught up in his own success to recognize that the person who mattered most was slipping away. The day Emily had told him she was leaving felt like it had happened just yesterday, yet it had been years. Ryan could still see her standing in their living room, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and finality. "I can't keep doing this, Ryan. I can't keep waiting for you to see me, to see us." Ryan had stood there, stunned, unsure of how to respond. He wanted to fight for her, to beg her to stay, but his pride had held him back. In that moment, he hadn't wanted to show weakness, to admit that he had failed her in every way that mattered. He had told himself that everything would be fine, that Emily would come to understand. But deep down, he knew she couldn't wait forever. And she hadn't. She left, and he had never truly fought for her. He'd been too proud to follow her, to chase after the love he had taken for granted. Instead, he threw himself deeper into work, trying to numb the ache of loneliness that had started to settle in his heart. He had chosen his empire, and now, in the quiet of this moment, the weight of that choice felt unbearable. Ryan's thoughts snapped back to the present, and the painful image of Emily, now pregnant, filled his mind. He couldn't understand how she had moved on so quickly. The anger and resentment that had once clouded their relationship had faded in the years since their divorce, but the sight of her with someone else, carrying his child, hit him like a dagger. What had gone wrong? Why hadn't he been enough for her? Ryan couldn't help but feel a deep sense of failure as he watched her smile, the glow of pregnancy radiating from her as she chatted with her companion. It was a stark reminder of the life they could have had, the family they might have built together if he had only chosen to prioritize her when it mattered most. The knowledge that Emily was now embarking on a new chapter with someone else filled him with a bitter, gnawing feeling. He couldn't understand why it hurt so much. He was the one who had let her go. Yet, seeing her pregnant with another man's child, he realized the full extent of what he had lost. It was a wound that no amount of success, no deal or acquisition could ever heal. Ryan sat at the table, his thoughts in turmoil. He could hardly focus on Amanda's voice anymore. Her words felt distant, lost in a haze as his mind raced with memories of Emily. There was a burning need inside him. He had to speak to her, to get some kind of closure, even if it meant facing the emotions he'd worked so hard to bury. His decision came abruptly, as if something inside him broke free. He excused himself from Amanda, offering a brief, distracted explanation. "I'll be back in a minute." Amanda's response was a distracted smile, her attention already half on someone else across the room. She didn't seem to notice the internal storm brewing inside him. Ryan didn't care. His focus was entirely on Emily. He walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air, his mind racing with a mix of uncertainty and determination. The moment he stepped outside, his eyes found her, Emily, standing with her companion. She looked serene, glowing in the soft streetlight, her hand resting gently on her growing belly. Ryan's breath caught in his chest, but he didn't stop. He walked towards her, his footsteps firm despite the unease in his heart. "Emily," Ryan said, his voice betraying a hint of hesitation. She turned to him, surprised at first, and then her expression softened. "Ryan, it's been a long time." The words hung between them, filled with so much unsaid history. Ryan struggled to keep his composure as they faced each other. His heart pounded, and he could feel the weight of the years pressing down on him. He tried to maintain his usual confidence, but Emily's gaze, so calm and knowing, pierced through him. "You look good," he muttered, his attempt at small talk feeling hollow. He quickly cleared his throat. I saw you inside. I didn't expect to see you here. She smiled softly, but there was no warmth in her eyes for him, not the warmth he had once known. I didn't expect to see you either, she replied gently. I didn't even know you were back in town. Ryan swallowed hard, fighting the mix of regret and confusion swirling in his chest. He tried to focus, to stay in control, but the flood of emotions he had tried to bury for so long were creeping to the surface. As they stood there, the words flowed between them, heavy and awkward. Emily was polite, but there was a distance now that Ryan couldn't ignore. She talked about her life, about her new partner, her voice lighter, warmer. I'm happy, Ryan. Really, Emily said, her eyes shining with a contentedness that made his chest ache. I'm with someone who values me in ways you never did. We're starting a family, a real family. Ryan's heart sank. The words stung more than he anticipated, but he didn't know how to respond. It was as if everything he had missed, everything he had failed to give her, was suddenly on display. The reality of her new life, with someone else, someone who understood her needs, who was there in ways Ryan had never been, was a sharp contrast to the emptiness he had carried since their divorce. Why so soon, though? Ryan's voice cracked before he could stop it. After everything we went through, why this so quickly? Why him, and why a baby now? Emily's face softened, but there was a quiet strength in her response. It's not about timing, Ryan. It's about being with someone who sees me, who cares for me the way I need to be cared for. It's about building something that feels right, not just chasing after a dream that was never truly ours. Ryan wanted to argue, to defend himself, but the words caught in his throat. Emily wasn't angry. She was calm, resolute, almost as if she had already made her peace with everything. And that realization, that she had moved on while he was stuck in the past, made the guilt rise up inside him like a tidal wave. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truth. Ryan felt a knot form in his chest. He had spent so much time trying to protect his image, his success, his career, that he had never stopped to consider what Emily had truly needed. Now, standing before her, watching her glow with the joy of a future she had finally found, Ryan realized the depth of his mistake. He had taken her for granted, always assuming there would be time to fix things, that things could always be patched up later. But there was no later anymore. The guilt crushed him. Every missed opportunity, every time he had chosen work over her, came flooding back. He didn't know how to express it, how to apologize for the years of emotional neglect. His pride had always kept him from admitting his mistakes. But now, with Emily standing there, so sure of herself, he realized how small his excuses truly were. Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. He wanted to apologize, wanted to say something that might undo the years of distance between them, but he couldn't. Instead, he stood there, silently staring at Emily, the weight of his regrets threatening to drown him. Inside the restaurant, Amanda sat back in her chair, eyes subtly scanning the room. She had always been observant, but tonight, something felt different. Her attention shifted from the glitzy surroundings to Ryan, who had been distant for most of the evening. She noticed how his gaze kept drifting toward the entrance, as if something or someone had caught his attention. As the minutes passed, her curiosity grew. She couldn't help but glance in the direction Ryan had been staring at. Her eyes landed on Emily, the woman she recognized as Ryan's ex-wife, walking into the restaurant with a man by her side. It wasn't just the sight of Emily that stirred something in Amanda. It was the way Ryan froze when he saw her. His usual confidence seemed to evaporate, replaced by something Amanda couldn't quite place. Emotion, vulnerability, maybe even regret. Amanda watched them from the corner of the room, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. She didn't know what had happened between Ryan and Emily, but the tension in the air was undeniable. Emily's presence was having an effect on Ryan, one that Amanda hadn't seen before, and that worried her. When Ryan returned to the table, the air felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. Amanda had been waiting, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. She didn't even wait for him to sit before she fired the question that had been building inside her all evening. What was that about? Amanda's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. Ryan paused, his gaze dropping to the table. He wasn't ready for this. Not now, not after everything that had just happened. But he knew he couldn't avoid it. Amanda leaned forward, her voice laced with suspicion. I saw the way you were looking at her. Don't tell me it's nothing, I can see it. There's still something between you two, isn't there? Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. His mind was still reeling from his conversation with Emily. The emotions were still raw, tangled up in regret and confusion. He couldn't deny what Amanda was saying, even if he didn't know how to explain it. Amanda. His voice trailed off, but he couldn't find the right words to justify what she'd seen. Amanda wasn't letting it go. Don't lie to me, Ryan. I've been sitting here watching you all night, and I can't help but feel like I'm just an afterthought to you. Do you still love her? The question hit harder than Ryan anticipated. The truth, long buried under years of pride and unresolved feelings, bubbled to the surface. He had spent so long pretending that everything was fine, that his past with Emily didn't matter anymore. But standing here with Amanda, caught in this moment of raw honesty, the weight of it all became unbearable. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, his eyes closing for a brief second as he gathered his thoughts. He had to say it. There was no running from it now. I've always loved her, Amanda, Ryan admitted, his voice low, almost a whisper. I thought I could move on, that I could leave the past behind, but seeing her, pregnant with someone else, it made me realize how much I lost. Amanda's face went pale. She had expected many things, but not this. The confession cut deep, far deeper than she anticipated. For a moment, she just stared at him, processing his words. You still love her, Amanda repeated, her voice trembling with disbelief. You're still in love with her. Ryan nodded, his eyes avoiding hers. I didn't want to admit it, but I do. And seeing her now, it's like everything I've been running from hit me all at once. The room felt cold to Amanda, as though everything around her had shifted in an instant. She stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back with a sharp scrape against the floor. Ryan looked up, his face stricken with guilt, but Amanda wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking past him, her mind racing. So that's it then? You've been pretending to be happy with me while your heart's still with her? Amanda's voice broke, her frustration and hurt boiling to the surface. She had always known Ryan was focused on his career, but she had convinced herself they had something real, something worth fighting for. Now, everything felt like a lie. I don't know what to say, Ryan murmured, standing up slowly. I never wanted to hurt you, Amanda. I really didn't. But Amanda wasn't listening anymore. The pieces clicked into place. Their relationship, the dinners, the luxury, the affection, it had all been so convenient. Ryan had been there when it suited him, but Emily had always been the one he couldn't forget. Amanda felt betrayed, her worst fears confirmed. I think you need to figure this out on your own, Ryan, Amanda said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't want to be part of your second choice. I'm done pretending. Before he could say anything more, she turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Ryan standing alone in the dim light. The next few days were a blur for Ryan. His mind was clouded with uncertainty, bouncing between his past with Emily and his present with Amanda. He found himself constantly replaying the moment he saw Emily in the restaurant, the emotions that surged inside him, regret, longing, a sense of loss. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, laughing and glowing with her new partner, pregnant with a future he thought he could share with her. But reality had a cruel way of grounding him. He couldn't turn back time. He couldn't undo the years of neglect and emotional distance he had put between them. Emily had moved on, and he had no right to expect otherwise. His relationship with Amanda, however, had always felt different. It had been built on status, convenience, and attraction to his wealth. Their connection was transactional, fulfilling the roles they were expected to play in a world of wealth and prestige. Amanda had been a companion, a glamorous figure by his side, but there had never been a deep emotional bond. Nothing like the love he once shared with Emily. Ryan sat alone in his office, staring out the window at the city skyline. The decision weighed heavily on him. Emily or Amanda? His heart ached with the thought of losing both, but he knew he couldn't keep living in the middle, torn between them. He had to choose, and it had to be now. Ryan decided he couldn't continue the facade with Amanda. He had to end things with her, no matter how painful it might be. The relationship had never been built on mutual love, and staying with her now would only prolong the inevitable. Ryan respected Amanda enough to know that she deserved someone who could truly give her the emotional connection she wanted, someone who wasn't still haunted by a past love. He called Amanda to arrange a meeting, his stomach churning with dread. When she arrived, she was still clearly upset from their earlier confrontation, but there was a guarded calmness in her demeanor. Amanda, Ryan started, his voice steady, but with a hint of regret. I've been thinking about everything, and I need to be honest with you. I can't keep pretending. I've always cared for you, but our relationship, it was never what I thought it was. It was more about convenience, about appearances, about what others expected from us. Amanda's face hardened as she processed his words. She had suspected this was coming, but hearing it out loud was still a blow. So, what now? She asked, her voice tight with emotion. You, or just going to walk away from everything we built? After everything? Ryan shook his head. I'm not walking away from what we had. I'm just acknowledging that it wasn't enough. I owe it to both of us, to be honest. I can't keep living in the past, in the shadows of what I missed with Emily. I have to face that reality. Amanda stood up, her eyes narrowing. You think I'm just going to let you walk out like that, after everything you said to me? I'm sorry, Ryan said quietly, his heart heavy with the weight of his decision. But I can't be with you anymore. The next time Ryan saw Emily, it was not in the restaurant, but in the park near her apartment. He had called her, asking for a chance to speak, to explain himself. Emily had agreed to meet him, though she had made it clear she wasn't sure what good it would do. When they sat down on the bench, there was an awkward silence. Ryan searched for the right words, but none seemed adequate. He had hurt her. There was no getting around that. Emily, he began, his voice strained. I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you. I've made mistakes. I neglected you. And I let the most important thing slip away from me. I let work come between us, and I never truly saw how much I was hurting you. Emily looked at him, her expression softening slightly but still guarded. "Ryan, you can't undo the past," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I've moved on, and I've built a life with someone else. I'm pregnant with his child. I'm happy, Ryan. I'm really happy." Ryan's heart sank. Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. He had wanted to hear that she still had feelings for him, that there was a possibility of rekindling what they had. But it was clear that was no longer the case. "I understand," Ryan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But will you ever forgive me? I never stopped loving you." Emily's eyes softened, though a tinge of sadness remained. "I'll always care about you, Ryan," she said, her voice softening. "But you can't keep holding on to the past. You've hurt me, and I can't go back to that place. I need to look forward now." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I know. I understand." As Emily stood up to leave, Ryan felt the finality of it all. He had made his choice, but the consequences of that choice were more painful than he could have ever anticipated. His heart ached as he watched her walk away, carrying the life he could never have again. Weeks had passed since Ryan made the decision to end things with Amanda and finally confront his past with Emily. His days were now filled with an eerie sense of emptiness. Despite the luxury of his penthouse, the busy meetings, and the endless flow of business deals, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, something far more significant than the wealth that had once defined him. Late one evening, as he sat alone in his office, looking out over the city lights that sparkled like diamonds beneath him, Ryan found himself reflecting on everything that had led him here. He had built his empire, but at what cost? The sacrifices he had made in the name of success, the time he had let slip by without ever considering what really mattered, his family, his love for Emily, and the future they once dreamed of together. His mind returned to Emily, to the moment when he watched her walk away for the last time. He hadn't even been able to give her the one thing she had needed most, his time, his presence, his love. Instead, he had chosen work, always believing that success and status would fill the void. But now, he saw the truth. Success meant nothing without emotional fulfillment. It was the people you loved and the connections you built that gave life real meaning. Ryan finally understood. He regretted the years lost to his obsession with ambition, but he knew that the only way forward was to learn from his mistakes. He vowed to never take relationships for granted again, to never allow his career to overshadow the people who truly mattered in his life. Meanwhile, across the city, Emily had found peace in her own life. She was no longer living in the shadow of the past. The baby growing inside her was not just a new life. It symbolized her new beginning, a fresh start away from the emotional wounds Ryan had left behind. Though she would always carry a piece of Ryan in her heart, after all, they had shared a love that had once felt all-encompassing. Emily had learned to let go. The pain of their broken marriage had dulled with time, replaced by the excitement of the future. She looked forward to becoming a mother, to the joy of raising her child with someone who valued her and would never take her for granted. She had learned to love herself first, to prioritize her own happiness and well-being, and in doing so, she was finally free. Emily smiled as she looked at the baby clothes she'd just bought, her heart filled with quiet hope for the future. She knew she was ready for this new chapter of her life. Ryan's world had shifted, but it wasn't the easy kind of change. He still carried the weight of his choices, his missed opportunities, his broken relationships, and the realization that some things could never be fixed. His relationship with Emily was over, and there was no going back. But he wasn't the same man he had been before. The lessons he had learned were hard-earned, but they were shaping him into someone better, someone who understood the importance of love, vulnerability, and the fragility of time. Ryan was beginning to see that success could never fill the void that love and meaningful connections could. The road ahead would not be easy. Healing would take time, and personal growth was a journey, not a destination. But Ryan was no longer the driven, detached man he had once been. He had made mistakes, but now he was willing to face the consequences and grow from them. As he walked through his office, passing by the glass windows that overlooked the city, Ryan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his choices. He knew the future wouldn't be perfect. He knew that there would be times when he'd still feel the sting of regret. But he also knew that he was capable of becoming a better man, one who valued love, who sought to understand the deeper connections in life. For now, he would focus on the present, on making amends where he could, and learning to live with the decisions he had made. He wouldn't let his past define him, but rather, he would use it to create a future where he could grow, change, and maybe, someday, find the love he had once lost.